Well, good morning. These must be the faithful. Did you guys stay here all night? Often, I'm not a morning person. I wake up about noon. I don't mean out of bed. I mean, I'm up, but I'm not up, if you know what I mean. And I like to quote depending on your age, the well-known philosopher of the past, Red Skelton, who said, "Late to bed and early to rise makes me sleepier than most other guys." I can't see you, but I hear voices, so I'm ready to move. Okay, I'm Gary Habermas. This is a breakout, but they put it in this room because they figure there's going to be a lot of people by the time it's over. And I'm going to start. I think I'm on till, does 9:50 sound right? Yes. 9:50, pardon, 9:50? All right. Are the slides up? There we go. On right or left, this is the Shroud of Turin as it appears to the naked eye. You could have waited many hours in line for the few exhibitions, and you could have gotten up there, got your camera all ready, and looked at this and said, it looks like one of those psychological exams where you see whatever you think what you want to see. There's not much there. But by the way, I will tell you ahead of time, most of these slides are from the chief photographer for the Shroud of Turin research project team that did the investigation in 1978. Co-author of my two books was the editor for that team. And these pictures, most of them come courtesy of Barry Schwartz, who, if you've never seen the pictures on the website, the best Shroud website in the world is shroud.com. And Barry's a great guy, just wrote a chapter at a festschrift for me, which is really nice. The guy's not a Christian. He's a committed Jew. He does many speaking engagements a year, most of them in Baptist churches. And he says, I have heard the plan of salvation thousands of times. And he says, I'm not a Christian, but I don't get offended. He said, most of my Jewish friends get offended. I don't, and I've never heard this before, but this is worth a little mention. He said, I don't get offended because here's the way I look at it. They love me, or they wouldn't be talking to me, and I should be privileged when they present the plan of salvation to me for the 1,000th time. And he always hears it over and over again. He's a wonderful guy. So these are his courtesy of him. This is the Shroud that appears to the naked eye. And if you had taken photos and you were upset, you waited in line for a really long time and you don't see much there, and what do people think they're seeing? And this is the negative. Same picture. I'll show in a moment. I'll put them side by side. But this is better known. You see those marks down both sides, and they look like paper doll cutouts. They're almost the exact same size across from each other. It's because the Shroud has been involved in more than one fire, and it was folded up in a cedar chest type apparatus. Now it's in a fireproof place, but one time molten silver dropped on it and burned through the cloth. And so get to look in between there, and I think without me telling you a lot, you can see, I've got a pointer here, but I'll use it for key points. This is a man who's buried in the Shroud. His hands are crossed in front of him like this. He's lying on his back. There's some special features that we'll point out when we get there. But you can see the wound in the left wrist. The blood, which is light on the negative, is flowing up the arm. And you cannot see the wound in the right wrist, but it's obviously there because, it's covered by the hand, but the blood's flowing up the right arm too. The little squiggly marks, you're going to see these all in detail, but Romans had no rules about the 41 minus 1 Jewish rule for lashes that Paul said. I think Paul said he received it, 3 times? This man you have to guess how many marks are there in the places that are burned based on how many are there in the other parts. But he's got, you hear different measurements and estimates in the other areas, but he's got between 100 and 200 whipping marks on his body. So if you think of the Passion of the Christ with Gibson, the Gibson movie, when I watched that movie for the first time, I thought, This is horrible. But I knew he was going to turn over. I knew they were going to get his stomach because Gibson patterned some of the movie on the Shroud, and this man's beaten on every inch of his body except for his face, his forearms, and his feet. Everything else is beaten. Here's the contrast. Now, what you might notice is on the lower right-hand corner is what you just looked at, the negative. The shroud was wrapped lengthwise around, this is the man's body. It was wrapped this way. So when you open it up, the places on the head, I say places, there's a front end, it's one cloth, but it's front and back. It looped around the body, so there's a gap between the quote-unquote heads. So it wasn't tight on his head. And you have the top of the feet on one end and the bottom of the feet on the other end. And that's just kind of the markings that you can get used to here. This is one of the clearest photos, putting the faces side by side. And one thing you might want to note, there's a controversy about everything on this cloth, but I was doing this lecture one time, in fact, a couple times, and there were doctors down in the front row. And I started to go past this slide, and I'm a little early in the lecture to be telling you this, but because this picture's so good, I want you to see this. This is the original. And look under this person's lip, lower lip. A lot of things are ripped from like he looks like his lip has been ripped up to his nose by one of the blows. But underneath his lip is not ripped. Yet underneath, you can see these little tiny spots here. Those are commonly believed to be teeth and roots of the teeth. And the reason that's significant is it goes into the question of what caused the shroud image. And if the most popular theory is true, that this image was caused by radiation from a dead body, I remember when I first started giving these lectures, I would say, the jury's out on whether the radiation came down or the radiation came out. And one of the doctors said it obviously came out from the inside because it brought the image of the teeth up onto the cloth. And if that's true, there are comebacks to it. There's comebacks to everything. But if that's true, it confirms the argument that this is radiation from a dead body. Now, why you would get a radiation from a dead body is anybody's guess, but as I'll say later, this man is dead. So he's half dozen evidences that he's dead. So I'll just say those things right up front. You get used to looking at this. This is a 16th century piece of art, but I have it up here not only to show you it's old, and so is the image, because the angels are holding the cloth open and there's the head-to-head image. But this just gives you an idea of how the man was wrapped in the shroud. A couple questions. Some people say, that's not how they buried the dead. They wrapped him this way. Another objection is the New Testament says there were plural, ophonia in the Greek, plural cloths, and this is one. So those are two objections. This isn't the way they wrapped, and there's more than one of them. Well, a couple quick answers. We believe, my co-author and I, we're one of the scientists, we believe there were several shroud pieces, but this is the main one. In fact, Luke uses both the singular and the plural, and there could be a couple reasons for that. In fact, this is a special Greek word. One of the critical New Testament scholars of the past, John A.T. Robinson, who, if you remember, it goes back that far, he was called a God is dead theologian in the 60s, so he's not conservative. And he was a professor at Cambridge University, New Testament. And he said the word ophonia, the way they use it, it can work in the singular or the plural, although it's specifically with the Indians and stuff, it is both singular and plural. So what was Luke talking about? Is there a big one and little ones? Why is there one and many sort of thing? But anyway, we also have to remember that Jesus was buried hastily. They had to get him in the ground. And listen, I'm not even saying this is Jesus. I'm just saying if you think this fulfills your checklist of things it's got to be to even be in the ballpark of being Jesus. His burial was hasty. And the women came back with spices on Sunday morning, so the job wasn't completely done. And so the thought is he could have just gotten a cloth over him and put in the grave that way. And then that's why they wondered why if the stone had been rolled away, and how could they get in and finish the process. So, but as far as this way, I don't know why we have that's the idea of Jewish burial. It's not how the Jews buried, that's how the Egyptians buried. And Jews didn't bury. I'm not saying nobody did this, but they've discovered another skeleton now. But in the Dead Sea community, a man was buried just like this. In fact, I think there's 2 of them now, where pieces of the shroud are hanging on the skeleton, but the man's elbows are out and they're crossed in front of him like this. And when you put a person like a cigar, it's wrapped up this way, and this guy in the cemetery was wrapped this way. So this is certainly a possible way they buried. And I mean, who cares if it's not possible? It could all be explained by the fact that it's hurried, that this isn't the full process. So just some things for you to think about there. Okay, the number one question about the shroud up until just recently has been the carbon-14. And Ken Stevenson and I, he's my co-author, we wrote a book on the shroud in 1981, and then we wrote a follow-up in 1990. And just as the book was coming out in 1990, the report came out. I was in Oxford. I was lecturing at Christ Church, which sounds like a church, but it's the most prestigious college at Oxford University. And I was sitting there lecturing with students, and they said, "Did you hear the news? The news broke today." I said, "What's that?" "The shrouds are fake." I said, "What?" "The shrouds are fake." Well, this day, I lectured every other day, and the students took day trips every other day, and we were going into London. So got to the bus station in London, and there were piles of newspaper this high in several of them, and the headline was, "The shrouds are fake." And the story at that time was it had been carbon dated in 3 laboratories, which it was, Switzerland, Arizona, and Oxford. And they said the date came out to the middle of the Middle Ages. And so therefore, whatever else it is, it might be a nice relic. It could be the actual burial garment of a person who was crucified, but it's not Jesus. And there's been a number of responses. I've got 2 of them up here. This is an answer in a secular chemical journal, Thermochemica Acta. And the author, Ray Rogers, was the chief chemist for the Shroud team. He's a Los Alamos laboratory clinic, a chemist. And most of these guys are secular scientists. Most of the ones that did the investigation, Los Alamos, the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, and others. And he is, I don't know what his faith is or isn't. Knew Ray. He died shortly after he wrote this article, but a top-notch chemist, but he didn't want to talk about miracles. He starts this article out and he goes, "First of all, let's just get some things straight. I'm not going to discuss the resurrection. I'm not talking about miracles. It's a bunch of baloney. This is about a piece of science. I'm just describing the cloth." And in the cloth, in the article, he said that however the shroud was dated, because a lot of people don't know this, but they had extra pieces around. When they did experiments on it, there were pieces they didn't use, but there were pieces of the cloth. And he compared a thread they took off the sample that they carbon dated and threads that they had from the investigation, and he said they're not the same cloth. He said, "Now, I'm not telling you I don't think they're the same. I'm not telling you I think they look different." He said, "I'm talking about chemical reactions. One of them fluoresces, one of them does not fluoresce. These are just not the same cloth." And he published it. This is a secular peer-reviewed chemical journal. And this is from the abstract that he wrote. And it says, in 1988, the date on the shroud was placed at between 1260 and 1390 with a 95% chance of accuracy, confidence. And that prompted questions. How could this be Jesus? I mean, no one says it has to be, but can you say that if it's 14th century? And then this comment in red, he said, observations prove that the radiocarbon sample was not part of the original cloth of the Shroud of Turin. The radiocarbon date was thus not valid for determining the age of the shroud. Now, it doesn't say what the shroud is, but it says what the shroud isn't. And the date is, according to Ray Rogers, this article got a lot of publicity. And then last year, what's that, 2019, another article came out. Tristan Casabianca and a team took, two of the team members I recall were PhDs in statistics. And what they did was they took the shroud dates, and they found out that scientists are scientists, and they know how to carbon date, but they don't know how to do statistics. And they did something like average the dates. And you can't average dates. You can't just say, well, the median one is this, and so that's how. And so what they published an article in the Oxford Journal, Archaeometry, very prestigious Oxford journal. In fact, if I got this story right, I might be wrong, but I heard that the current editor, at least in 19, the current editor of this journal is one of the guys who signed off on the 88 carbon-14 as being medieval. And he thought this was a worthy enough comeback, I presume. You don't publish things that you think are garbage. And he thought that this is an alternate theory to Ray Rogers' the two cloths are different theory. And so you dated the wrong one. This one says you got a bunch of dates, but you got the wrong, it's whatever it is, you know it's not 14th century because you guys bungled the dating in terms of statistics. Dating, okay, but you don't take a whole bunch of dates over centuries and average the dates or whatever they thought they did. We actually had this guy at Liberty University about a year ago. And he spoke in chapel. He did an awesome job. And he told everybody, he said, he's from France, a professor, and he said, I'm a skeptic, unbeliever, and all kinds of things. And he said, when I first studied the shroud, he said, I can tell you what happened. He said, I fell on my knees and became a Christian after he studied it. Doesn't prove it's true, just a side testimony they gave us where he was there. But Archaeometry is a very prestigious journal, but I think it's really cool if the editor, in fact, was one of the fellows who broke the story. Oxford was one of the dating places. So this is an alternate deal. Now here's the problem with these two dating things. I'll give you a critique of the shroud. We know what the shroud date isn't, what they said it was, but we don't know what the shroud date is. And I will tell you this too, it's in our book, but it's not my shroud presentation, it's kind of unofficial. They did other tests that they weren't supposed to do. They just kind of, I don't want to talk too much in detail about it, but a couple tests were run that weren't supposed to be run, but at very reputable labs. And two of them, if I remember the story correctly, from Shroud team members, two of the dates were around 200 AD, and the other one was 70 AD, the dates. But the fellow who ran the test said, I really don't trust either date because there was some material on the cloth that I couldn't get off, some contaminated material, which happens over years. And so they're not sure, but they have had all I'm saying is they've had early dates as well as they've had late dates. Now, this is an argument on date that's entirely different from the carbon dating, but I find it very persuasive. On the left, obviously, is shroud face. And I didn't even tell you this, but if you look at these pictures and you go, why is that number 3 look the right way here, but when your other pictures, it's in reverse? Because when the shroud pictures were taken, there's a left-right light darkness reversal in photographs. So you'll see some later. But in the photographs, the originals, the blood is kind of a reddish brown. And in the x-rays, it's white. The blood's white. And you have to get used to what you're looking at. Like, for example, where's the spear wound? The spear wound is on the right side, upper right side, but some of the photos is on the left side. That's not because, we got the photos straightened around. Depends on whether you have the positive or the negative photos. But the argument here is, what happens with pictures of Jesus down through paintings, or not just paintings, wax, all kinds of things put on the background. And a lot of the pictures look like the man in the shroud. Now, that doesn't prove anything about the shroud. But it does seem to say from art history that a lot of people thought they were painting the face of Jesus. It only shows that people thought this image was the image of Jesus. Now, I'll show you why that's important. Even though it's their thinking and they could be wrong, I'll show you why that's important in a minute. Notice several things on these paintings. You'll see a few more. The man in the shroud, take a look at the left. It looks like he's got a short beard, more of a modern beard, and it looks like it's double pointed, and the point, maybe because he's been hit or something, but the point is a little off center. Well, that's because you're looking at a blood stain. It's not really a point at all. And the beard goes down to where you see that, not that large line, but it goes down, and he's got a more full beard. But that's going to come into play here. So the fella on the right, whoever painted this, he copies the shroud in a lot of aspects. For example, the man in the shroud seems to have his hair parted down the middle. It comes on both sides. If you get the fuller picture, the hair on the right side is behind the shoulder, behind further up. The left shoulder comes down longer. Got that double peak right here. There's a mark between his eyes that there's a difference of opinion as to what it is, but it's like a triangular shaped, it could have been a hit. It could have been from something, but he's got a triangular shaped mark here. Well, this guy on the right, thinking he's looking at Jesus, he paints a triangular shaped mark between his eyes. Why do you put triangles between people's eyes? Well, let's look, it's right there in that painting. I know, but number one, we don't know if it's Jesus. Well, I believe it is. Okay, I'm speaking for the artist. Okay, he said, I believe it is. But the man on the right, Jesus, is alive and well. He hasn't been beaten up, so why you put the triangle there? Oh, I don't know, because once again, I'm looking at Jesus there. So they put these things in the painting that don't belong in the painting. Now, the funniest one to me is that line across the throat. It's an ancient wrinkle in the linen cloth because it's filled with blood. You'll be able to see it in some of the color photos. And this guy, because he's looking at Jesus, he's got lines. He's got a short beard with a double-peaked beard off to the side, and he's got lines going across the throat. Why do you put lines going across the throat? I already told you, I'm painting the picture of Jesus, and that's him. Yeah, but even if it is Jesus, he's not hurt. Yeah, well, it's Jesus, so I put the lines there. Okay, why lines out in space? Why a triangle between the eyes? Why the hair behind the hair out in front? Why the part down the middle? Oh, the man in the shroud seems to have a little tiny wisp of hair right here in the middle, real small one. So he puts a little curl there or something. Now, what does all this prove? Besides the fact that he believes it's Jesus, what does it prove? Well, it shows he thought it was Jesus. But what happens if these shroud paintings predate the carbon-14 date? That means this thing was around a long time before the carbon dating. And since we don't know the date because the later dates have been abrogated, we want to know what date it is. We look for positive data to get some kind of date. So let me show you some things here that can contribute to a positive date. This is the famous, it's not a painting. It's like a wax, I forget the name of it. I'm not an artist. But notice there's no double peak there at all. But almost everything else, just going down your checklist, line down the middle of hair, the right hair is behind, the left is out. Look at that mysterious line across the throat at the bottom, because we want to be exact with Jesus. You know when this was made? 6th century AD. 6th century AD. Oh, well, wow. So was there a shroud around then? Looks like it. Well, wait a minute, I have another alternative thesis. Maybe the shroud was a fake based on the paintings, other way around. And this has got to be connected with Jesus, so that's how they thought Jesus looked. Well, we'll answer that a little later, but I'll tell you ahead of time, the shroud's not a painting of any other fake. But but somebody could say that. It was made from the photos. But otherwise, not photos, the artwork. You have to describe why this is so, these paintings are so ancient. Here's some more. This is a Roman gold coin in the upper left. It's called a solidus. There's actually more than one of these coins. You can still buy them today. I mean, you can still find them. They're pretty rare. They're gold, and they're real small. They're smaller than a dime. And the Roman Empire had announced that it became Christian in the 4th century, Constantine. And these coins, there's many of them. I mean, there's different kinds. They're minted between 695 and the early 700s AD. And it says on the coin something like King of Kings and Lord of Lords. They're celebrating Jesus on the coinage. And if you look, double peaked beard, line across the throat, the things coming out of his head that kind of makes him look like Frankenstein or something, that's the cross behind him. And it's plainly Jesus, because it says King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Now, the one at the bottom picture, what they did was color it to make it look like the original shroud, because they're going to do a comparison. That's the shroud. And the upper right, they did an overlay where the shroud face goes over the coin face. And there are, usually it's said that if you have 40 points of similarity between two photographs, they're identical photographs. Like someone robs a 7-Eleven store and all they have is a high school picture. And now the person would be 21. Well, they go for these points of overlay for identification. And there are, I've forgotten the number now, but I believe it's over 100 points of comparison between the Roman coins and the shroud face. And these are 690s, 700s. The earlier one, 6th century. There are a lot of paintings like this around the world. And wait a minute, let me go back here for a second. My point is that if the shroud, if these artists thought they were painting Jesus, and whoever it was, they were painting the shroud goes back to at least the 500s. So, but we don't know a date. Okay, that's one of the issues here. Scientists are split on this, but on the right eye of the man in the shroud, what looks like, especially in the right eye, there's some lettering in the left eye too, but on the right eye, this looks like a lepton. It's like a widow's mite, quote unquote. You can still buy those. And there's a staff there, and there's some writing. And in the case of what they can see through the cloth, through image enhancement, on the right is what you see on the cloth. And notice the Greek letters there, what look like in English when you transliterate. This isn't Greek, it's been transliterated, but to Latin, and you've got UCAI. And there's now that could either be on the right, that could be either your imagination, and do you think you see a staff there? Like the one on the right, maybe not. But you know what the thesis is, and they found a number of these. The UCAI is part of the name for Tiberius Caesar. This is a lepton of Pontius Pilate from 29 to 30 AD. And it seems to be, and people argue about, what are you seeing in that photograph? It looks like UCAI. Well, Josh McDowell's a good friend, but he said years ago, before we got to be friends, many years ago, about 1980, he wrote and he said, the shroud's fake, doesn't measure up to the New Testament. And one of the main problems is they spelled Caesar's name wrong. Guess what? They found 6 more leptons with the exact same misspelling of Caesar's name. So it is misspelled. Last time I heard there were 7 copies of these leptons with the misspelling. Just a little side. And you could say, well, why couldn't they get a lepton of, even if it's true, why couldn't they have gotten a lepton of Pontius Pilate and put this thing underneath the cloth? Well, it makes absolutely no sense for a lot of reasons. If you're going to put a cloth over the man's face, why do you put a coin underneath it where you can't see it? What are you going to do? Put your ultraviolet photographs on it in 500 AD? And it just doesn't make sense. Now, they did do that. There have been Jewish skulls in cemeteries found with coins down inside the skull. And they would frequently either put the coins over the eyes or over the mouth, and it would fall into the skull when the flesh, in ancient times, what you put would be going into a Jewish bone box. And there are frequently coins on the floor, because when you're reburying these skeletons. And now it is true that it was more of a pagan custom to put coins on, but not all Jews are religious. And you also have to remember that if the story in Matthew is historical, Romans came on the scene and checked before they stood in front of the tomb. Who knows if somebody came in and said, we're going to pay his way across the river Styx, and they put a coin down, you don't know. But it's difficult if this is a leapt and a Pontius Pilate, that increases the mystery. All right, I like this photo because this is the photo in 1978 when a group of American scientists gathered together in Turin. That's John Jackson sitting on the chair. He's a PhD theoretical physics, and he was a professor at the Air Force Academy in physics. And sitting around him are the men and women who are going to test the shroud for the next few days. Behind John, there's a table there, and you can see about the size of the shroud. It's 14 feet 3 inches long, about 3 feet 7 inches wide. It's a linen weave. And he's going over the last minute testing. I've got a number of testing photos. That's John on the upper with the cross stripes on his white shirt. The shirts are in again right now. This is 1978. That's Eric Jumper in the foreground. You can even see his name if you can read his tag there. It says Eric Jumper. And for the first time in history, since it's been done, as far as anybody knows, there's a backing on the shroud. And they're separating the backing from the cloth because they want to ask the question, does the image go all the way through the cloth? And we'll give that answer later. Now, I told you about Barry Schwartz, who owns the website Shroud.com, and he's there's about 5 scientific photographers on this team. The number varied, but about 35-ish scientists and assistants. And on the left is the other very well-known photographer, a Mormon, which tells you a lot about the cross. It's a typical group of Americans. John and Eric, devout Catholics. Miller there on the left, Vern Miller, is a Mormon. He's taken scientific photos. He's a professor at the Brooks Institute of Photography in California, one of the best-known art schools. And they were all present during these. The guy on the right's an Italian scientist. And they're taking the backing off. Now, let's keep this idea of diversity on the American team. This is Sam Pellicore, a physicist from the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena. Sam, if you're following the look on the shroud, he's doing microscopic work on the face of the man in the shroud. So if you look down to his left, you can see the hands crossed in front. So he's up about where the face is. Now, Sam, doesn't this look like a 70s photo? The guy's got long hair, he's got a long beard, he's got a flower power shirt on. I used to have some of those. And that's how he goes to work. So he's coming in, he's taking photos, but the guy's a physicist, and he's photographing the face. Now, Sam is an agnostic. He was one of the few agnostics on the team. So far we have Mormon, agnostic, a couple Roman Catholics. My co-author at that time was Jewish. He was Baptist. And later he became a charismatic pastor. So a lot of diversity here. But I'll show you pictures and I'll tell you what these investigations show. All right, Kodak made some sticky tape, special sticky tape samples that take samples off the feet and the area. And they're taking samples of the dirt and blood on the man's feet, especially on the soles of the feet, as you can imagine. And guess what? These samples they took, the dirt, quote unquote, is a species of limestone found only in the Jerusalem area. And that was written up in a peer-reviewed chemical journal about the dirt they found on this man's feet. So, if that's a lepton of Pontius Pilate, this is dirt from it goes a little south. I think this dirt goes down to the Dead Sea or something like that. But it's the area. Here's what the shroud looks like on the table with the photographs being taken. You say, well, that looks like infrared or something. Actually, this is ultraviolet. They took thousands of photos and did almost everything you could do except destructive testing. So in 1978, the shroud was not carbon dated. That came 10 years later, and then I told you what happened to the date. More pictures here of the data. They took thousands and thousands of photographs. Whoop, I don't know what happened there. See, you know where we're going now. All right. These next two photos are not the actual color of the shroud. These are enhanced photos where everything the same density as blood shows up red. And you can see before the Passion of the Christ, before Mel Gibson's film, I think Westerners had a fairly dainty view of crucifixion. The man would have a few, in the old movies, they would have a few stripes, whipping, and of course you got the 5 major wounds, the 2 wrists, feet, and a side wound up here. But this is more like the Passion kind of photo. So you know what Gibson was doing when he did the movie. There's blood all over everywhere on him. He, if you look at the face closely, and there were a number of pathologists, the people who investigate, among other things, dead bodies to see what the cause of death is and so on. And the chief pathologist of the team was Bob Buckland, MD, JD. He used to teach medical law, University of Houston, but he was an LA assistant county coroner, and he's in charge of this. And you see the blood all over the place. Oh, also notice, I'm not sure I'll have time to talk about it, but there's a gap between the hair and the face. That's thought by many people to be where the face cloth went. You go, well, the face cloth should have been over the face. That's not what the New Testament says. And the face cloth is only mentioned twice: Lazarus, John 11, Jesus, John 20. And at both places it says, the word means handkerchief, but it was rolled up. It says rolled up and placed around the head. You know the old cartoons where someone's got a toothache and they tie the thing up on top and it's around their jaw? That's kind of what, and the Jews are commanded in the Mishnah, the Old Testament commentary, to bind the jaw up and death so the jaw doesn't pop open, and that's how they buried. Looks like there's a cloth there, and the hair, something's holding the hair. The hair's frozen, almost like you used hairspray. The hair comes out and it's like stopped there, and you can't tell what's holding it up there. By the way, there's that wrinkle I told you about. See, it looks like it's a short beard, but the beard goes all the way down, keep going below that wrinkle, and you can see it goes down quite a bit further. So that wrinkle is an ancient wrinkle. The blood from the man followed along that little trench from the wrinkle. All right, here's a different enhanced photo, and you can see these squiggly marks. You have close-ups later coming up, but you can see all over his entire body these little whipping marks. Again, the left wrist wound is obvious, but the blood going up the wrist, you can't see the hole, the wound in the right wrist, but the blood's going up the arm on the right side too. My co-author, Ken Stevenson, there's a number of these. These are called photomicrographs. He says when he does it, and I used to say this, but I saw the look on the people's faces, so I quit saying it. But this is a close-up of the blood wounds. And I'm not saying it is or isn't Jesus, but you know the significance of blood for Christians. And on this picture, there's some silver threads. If you can see this from where you're sitting, like this silver thread, those are image areas. The blood is a contact image. The silver crossed distance to get on the cloth of up to a few centimeters. I'll explain that in a moment. But the blood stains are contact stains. So the blood comes from the linen being on the open wounds, front and back, as you'll see. But the image didn't get there by contact. The image is not a contact image. They've done dozens of tests to show how the image got there. It's not sure, but it did not get there from being in contact with the body. Okay, so these are close-ups. Early at the Air Force Academy, someone took a photograph of the shroud and they put it into a computer known as a VP8 image analyzer. There's only a few of these working in existence. One of them's not far from here. Last time I heard it was in Raleigh. And they were surprised when the photo came out and it looked like they're looking at a real person, like a mummy casket or something. It's a person's face. Now, they put other people's faces in there, and photos are not 3D, but in spite of the advertising you hear sometimes. But they felt that this guy's looking at it. By the way, notice the beard. There's the wrinkle, and look how far the beard goes down. And also notice the hair not up against the face. Just several things we've already said. But they were more interested in the fact that these photos give 3D data. When Ken Stevenson and I, for some reason this green one is a very popular photo of the shroud. But when I flew down to New Orleans, I was living in Detroit at the time, and I flew down because Ken and I decided to do our book, the first book together, and I walked into his home. I walked in the front door and I turned left to go into the living room where he was leading me because we were going to be working on the dining room table off the living room, and this was leaning up against the curtains, and it's 6 feet tall. It's not like an image or an idol. This is a cardboard readout from the VP8 image analyzer. This is what the VP8 image analyzer shows. You can see the man has large contusions under his eyes, possibly the rip in the lip, but he looks like he's looking at you. And other photos don't do this. The 3D, until the teeth, those who believe the teeth are real, until the teeth, this was the number one hardest thing to explain in the shroud. How do you get a 3D photo when other photos put in the VP8 image analyzer? You get the eyes falling out, falling in, and the nose is flat, and it's just a goofy picture. You don't put photographs in the VP8 image analyzer. It was for cloth to distance shot in Voyager space shots. So you could see distance on Mars or something, but not faces. But this face is 3D. On the left, I have two photos here. That's a model of the Roman flagrum. One has actually been discovered now in Pompeii. And this is a weapon, famous weapon that the Romans used for whipping. There's dumbbell, in this case, they could do anything with it, but these are dumbbell-shaped pieces of lead that are put on the end of the cloth. They often sharpen the piece of the lead so it would gouge out pieces of flesh when it's struck. It's a horrible weapon. And this man, that's a drawing on the right, but that's a close-up of the back wounds and why they think it's the variety with the pieces of lead. And this is the back on the right, on the left. The right is more zeroing in on the carnage on this man's back. Now, he's been made to carry a heavy object, or he's rubbed up against a heavy object, or both after the whipping. How do you know? Because look how the blood is congealed in those areas and has been in the scapular region of the back, upper back. Now, you see that line going across the waist right there. That's actually from blood. The right wound flowed down to the waist and across the back where they were moving the body for burial. And you can see the photo goes, look in the lower right-hand corner, those are close-ups of the calves. I told you this man's been beaten everywhere. They said, I don't know whether it is, but when the data first came out, they said there were at least 2 Roman soldiers who were doing the whipping. One of them was significantly taller than the other one, and one was left-handed. And if you wonder how they get that stuff, just watch those police movies on TV. That was a joke, but it's true. This is an author's drawing of the wounds that looks like the left foot is nailed over the right foot with a single nail. How do you know? Because the man in the shroud is in a state of rigor mortis, one of the many evidences that he's dead. And the left foot is frozen like this toward the right foot. So they think it was probably like this. And there's the places for if you put your thumb against your little finger, this is called the thenar furrow, and the nail was right at the base of it. Now, you can call that a hand if you want to, but we're not trying to make it look like the Greek in the New Testament. First of all, I'm not saying this is Jesus, and secondly, there's no word for wrist in Koine Greek. So sometimes Greek for wrist is a very inaccurate word in Greek. One time it's used for the upper arm. So wrist is hand in Greek, but this could be hand in Greek. But this man is nailed right here with the wound exiting at the wrist in the back, but it's in the front, it's not, it's the wrist. And now, notice since the shrouds come out, all the scholarship on the resurrection and cross has changed to wrist wounds, where it used to be hand wounds. This will not hold the weight of an adult male body. All right, there's a close-up of the left hand. I already told you the right hand, you can't see the wound, but you can see the blood. This is a drawing of where the spear went in. A lot of theories. I know one of the pathology books that I use gives 11 theories for where the spear went in. Almost all of them, like 8 of the 11 theories, involve a heart wound. Now, even besides a heart wound, notice it's going through the pleural cavity. So you catch lung and heart on this one. And people don't survive these today, let alone survive these in the first century without doctor's care, let alone be put in a cave without, I mean, he's put in a cave. He's buried individually, whether it's Jesus or not. He's not thrown on the ground, or we wouldn't have this shroud. And around the heart, there's a sac. It's called the pericardium. It holds a few cc's of watery liquid. John says blood and water came up, but Bob Buckler, the chief pathologist, says the water is very obvious coming down here, and it's more obvious across the backflow. So he's been pierced through the heart. The water could also come from the lung. When you're when you're beaten badly, you get what's called pleural effusion. You got to be beaten really badly to have this. What happens is the diaphragm fills up, and you have blood, and you have a watery fluid on it. Could have been a little bit of both, but there's a blood and water. This is the actual photo. Now, nuns came and sewed patches on the shroud, which is what you saw in the very first photo. But this is the chest wound. It's just not quite 2 inches across in the upper chest region. These are some of my favorite photos. Arguing that the image on the shroud was probably radiation. It's the major theory done in a bunch of laboratories, laser labs and things like that. One of the main researchers now is a guy named Robert Rucker, a retired nuclear chemist, and I think that's a nuclear physics. And what they did here was take the photo of the man in the shroud and superimpose a photo of a human skeleton. The guy who did this is a medical doctor, Duke Medical School. He just passed away recently, but he was at Duke Medical School for a long time, and a missionary later. He was a missionary in the Philippines. The hand is put there, and a lot of people say that the fingers look way too long. See, it must be a fake, because the fingers are way too long. Well, guess what? Not the fingers looking too long. You're looking at the bones going way up into the back of your hand, which makes the fingers look a lot longer. So it's like wow, that's like another radiation argument. Also, they believe you can see the backbone through the front. Another, like the lip wounds. Now, this is the one I showed you at the beginning, and I said if you look underneath the bottom lip, especially of the photo on the left, you can see these little spots that look like teeth, even roots. Okay, the same doctor split the shroud face in half and put a human skull photo next to it. Now, this is odd. I think he took his own picture, but he forgot to take his glasses off. He's got glasses in the skull. I mean, obviously it's a living person, right? But it's getting the skull. And look where the tooth line goes right across from the skull, right across into the teeth on the shroud. This is one of the real enigmas. This is the teeth now, because if this is teeth, people who don't like the shroud are in trouble because it looks like radiation coming from a dead body. So these are the last, skipped one here. Oh, now my slides aren't coming up. No big deal. It's a repeat of the first picture I gave you. And what's the conclusion? My time's up in just a couple minutes. People ask me all the time, what's your view on the shroud? I'll tell them facetiously, but my 2 research assistants are down here. They'll tell you the answer I give you all the time. What I give all the time, I say it depends on what side of the bed I wake up in the morning and how much I'm awake when I get up and what kind of mood I'm in. Sometimes I say, yeah, I don't know, I'm down around 80. And sometimes I'm saying, this thing's really good. It's 90 or 95. It looks like, because I do most of my work with history and historical arguments in the New Testament. And there's a lot of arguments, historical arguments, this is Jesus. If your son or daughter is doing a paper for school on crucifixion, They go, oh, I'll just read the Gospels. Don't read the Gospels if you want to do a report on crucifixion, because they did a lot of things to Jesus that aren't normal. If you want to do Jesus' crucifixion, look at the Gospels, but don't do crucifixion. Why do you put a crown of thorns on a person who's going to be crucified? They crucified criminals, so why do you put something on their head? Well, this man has a series of, don't know it's a crown, but there's a series of puncture wounds throughout the top of the skull, and it goes all the way around to the back. It's more like a skull cap than it is a diadem. But I already told you about real odd things, like the real serious beating. I mean, they usually beat people before they crucify them, but why do you kill the guy before you crucify him? And this man's in bad shape. You wonder how Jesus died after a few hours. He's in very good shape, by the way. You can tell the contrast between the chest and the... And people say, well, how tall is this guy? And he's about 5'9", 5'10", 5'11", like that, about 5'10", and he weighs about 175 to 180 pounds. And when I say that, several men elbow their wife like, you married the guy right here, man, 5'10", 180 pounds. But he's quite well built, but he died after just a few hours. And that's not normal for crucifixion, but I mean, he was beaten almost to death, as you can see. And many of the victims died before they got to the cross. Many, many thousands of crucifixions in the ancient world. So I think there's a good chance the shroud is the burial garment of Jesus, because I think doing a historical argument, there are a lot of odd things done to Jesus that were also done to the man in the shroud. You go, yeah, that's my fake theory. They made the shroud to look like the ancient drawings and paintings, and it wasn't Jesus at all. They made this poor guy, or maybe they crucified a guy, to look like Jesus. But the problem with that is, you wouldn't have the radiation, you wouldn't have the 3D, you wouldn't have the superficial wounds, you wouldn't have the non-directionality. Even talk about those things, but those are the real strange things there to interpret. And if you faked it, you wouldn't have that data, because there are hundreds of burial cloths, and that's not on any of them. So it doesn't look faked, like to look like Jesus, but it looks a lot like Jesus, but Jesus was crucified in a very odd way. It just could be. Now, why do you say on a bad day you're 80? Because somebody could wake up some morning and make a fake that works on the scientific test. They could fake it. And they do it all the time. Many, 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 many examples have been done over the years. Some of them make the mistakes. The artists make a mistake or send them to the scientists, and they subject them to the tests that they do on the cloth. They always fail. They don't come out the same way. And so I think there's a fair chance, but I'll end with this thought. In my opinion, the historical argument that we did yesterday in the minimal fact form of it in particular, there's different forms of reliability. A reliability from the Gospels argument works. There's Ben Shaw down there, one of the guys, TA's, he's got a great presentation on 13 arguments for reliability in the New Testament. There's different ways to do reliability. My favorite, of course, is the minimal facts. So I'll end by saying I think the minimal facts argument is stronger by far than the shroud argument. I think the shroud is a little bit iffy because somebody could always come up with something, but I think it helps in the overall argument. We mailed our first volume of the magnum opus into the publisher on Friday. We do have a few paragraphs here and there in the shroud. So we think it's helpful, but it's not the be-all, end-all test. Could be Jesus, may not be Jesus. I'll stop right there. But if you want to start with evidence, I go to the minimal facts argument before I go to the shroud. But I think the shroud's it's very intriguing and quite good argument. Thank you.